Welcome to another episode of On the Issues with Alon and Ben-Meir. Today's guest is Evaggelos Vallianatos, a historian, environmental strategist, and writer who has served as a visiting professor on environmental history and environmental regulation and politics at a number of universities. He worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years, where he studied U.S. agriculture and pest management practices and policies. In this episode, Alon and Evaggelos discuss the current political juncture of the climate change discussion in the United States, what countries are doing globally to combat climate change, the societal, health, and human rights impacts of climate change, and what actions everyday people can do to help combat climate change.
Good morning to you. Evaggelos Vallianatos, am I right?
Yes.
I want to, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time today to have this podcast. I must tell you, although I don't write much about climate change, but I also know the horrific impact of a climate change on so many, by millions and millions of people in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere. So I have a center called the Center for Humanitarian Conflict Resolution, which focuses on a human rights issue in conflict. And to me, climate change is a major conflict that has not been adequately still addressed, regardless of the Paris Accord and all of this. So first of all, I wanted to know how important a thing, of course, you dedicated most of your life to this critically important subject, and I'm so delighted and I'm grateful to you for taking the time, because people need to know a great deal more about the impact, the horrific impact of the climate change. So let me first just very briefly introduce you. So Evaggelos Vallianatos is a historian, environmental strategist, and a writer. He has served as a visiting professor on environmental history and environmental regulation and politics at a number of universities, so many of them. I just want to mention a couple of them: University of New Orleans, Bright College, American University, Georgetown University, University of Maryland, among so many others. He worked for the United States Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years. And Evaggelos also wrote 6 books, including very well-known books as Poison Spring. So he received a PhD in European and Greek history from the University of Wisconsin. Again, what a pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you.
So I want to begin by asking you to give us, our audience, a sort of a rundown, like a couple of minutes. You are having concentrated so much of your time, energy, and life to this critically important subject. Where do you see us at this juncture when it comes to climate change?
Let me start with an incident that happened to me personally in 1989-90. The EPA has sent me to Humboldt State University to teach for a year. And I did that. This is a university in Northern California. So on my way back, I wrote an essay for the Chicago Tribune relating to climate change. That was my first article I published on climate change in 1989.
Wow.
When I got back, nothing unusual happened, but then a few months later, the Wall Street Journal picked up 2 paragraphs from that article and reprinted it. And the moment that happened, this was Earth Day 1990.
Wow.
So
36 years ago. It's a long time.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, I got back in my office and I found a letter of reprimand from my supervisors. And in the letter, they charged me with all sorts of, why would I have the right to temerity to criticize the industry and charge them with climate change, that sort of thing. So I took the letter of reprimand and I went straight to the administrator, who happened to be Bill Riley, and he was a Republican appointee of President George Walker Bush.
Right.
Well, he saw the letter. He said, forget about it. Nothing will happen.
Okay.
Because the letter of reprimand in EPA or the government is a step number one before they fire you. And I was simply arguing in the letter that these companies, ExxonMobil and so on, they have been burning this petroleum for so long, especially since the Industrial Revolution of 19th century, that the amount of warming gases coming out of the burning of the petroleum or coal or natural gas are rising steadily, and therefore they're creating a temperature that the Earth never experienced in its millennia of history. And that's what I argue. But then these people, because they were so devoted to the companies, just like today, we have a new administration that is doing exactly the same thing, that they wanted to punish somebody. I'm like me. I mean, I wasn't exactly distinguished of anything. I was simply trying to do something to inform people about what I had learned. And so that step, that incident, convinced me even more that this issue is absolutely of significance, of tremendous significance, because we're dealing with the health of the planet. We're not just dealing with the health of a country or an individual. The planet, what the Greeks and other people have called Mother Earth.
Mother Earth,
And
yes.
so it's just too big. And as I can see it, 36 years later, we haven't learned anything. We just simply go from worse to worse. And for instance, I'll give you another example now from a study done at the White House in 2023 when Mr. Biden was the president. And this document is known as the U.S. National Climate Assessment, November 14th, 2023. And in that document, they say that the amount of carbon dioxide, for instance, in the atmosphere, it's much higher than any thousands of years before that. The same thing with methane and other warming gases. And these gases that come out of the burning of petroleum, they simply grab chunks of energy from the sun and then they later release it. So it's the equivalent, or if you use a metaphor, it's the equivalent of having a warm blanket around the planet that adds to the temperature already from the sun. So clearly the temperature is rising, and as a result, of course, we have the effects of not only tremendous forest fires, and I live in California, and in California we have had too many fires. In fact, I took a picture of a fire that was taking place 30 miles away from the up in the atmosphere. And you have the governor of California who said, hey, anybody who has any doubt, come over here and we'll teach you a lesson. You can see the effects of what we're doing. And you have, of course, then not only you have forest fires, you have tremendous storms of enormous strength. You have rain, and some people call it bomb rain because the rain comes down so fast that you have flooding immediately. And then the effects, of course, on some small islands in the Pacific are tremendous because they will eventually disappear because of the melting of the ice in Antarctica, and they will disappear as nations. And in fact, they managed to convince the United Nations to pass a resolution, and then they went to the International Court of Justice, and that Court of Justice said that it's absolutely the law now, that you cannot continue to do what you have been doing all along because you are threatening the whole ecosystem of the planet, plus you're threatening the survival of human beings. So no matter how you look at it, the global warming, to me, it's even of enormous, much more importance than, say, having a nuclear bomb explosion. And we need to get rid of both of them, of course, get rid of nuclear weapons, plus stop or slow down the burning of these fossil fuels, and therefore control the effects of all this and eventually stop it completely. I mean, after all, we have the sun, S-U-N. The ancient Greeks used to worship the sun as a god. In the island of Rhodes, they had a tremendous statue on the harbor of the island of Rhodes, and they worshiped the sun as a god for millennia. So it's just, to me, it's an abomination. I go to Greece and I don't see much of any solar panels or anything like that, though they do. They say that half of the energy that they use comes out of renewable resources, and maybe they do that. But it's kind of an issue that we need to inform Americans and other people that this is not a joke. It's happening.
It's very serious, yes.
Yeah, it's a very serious, threatening, life-threatening question, and it's if you take it philosophically, you look back and you say, look, you have all these thousands and thousands of very well-educated people. You have hundreds of universities with thousands of professors, climatologists, geologists, you name it, and they have them, as we had at the EPA. Why don't these guys, men and women, get together and really insist that their government does do something and stop the burning of this petroleum and gas, natural gas and coal that is threatening the livelihood and life of everything, of all of us.
In this context, I want to ask you, the climate change, the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord has been now, how many years since it's been signed?
It was 2015.
Yeah, 2015, right, and 11 years ago. And the Trump administration withdrew from the climate Paris Accord in his first term. But tell me, how are the other countries, the signatories to the Paris Accord? Have they been largely adhering to the accord, because it was really voluntary? I mean, there was no enforceable mechanism attached to the accord itself. So basically, it was left to the various countries, the various signatories of the treaty, to do whatever they feel they have to do. But of course, many of these countries, given, for example, the socioeconomic condition, sometimes the political environment, preventing some of these countries actually from moving as fast as necessary to meet some of the objectives of the Paris Accord. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Before, I want to get back to the Trump administration a little later, but can you elaborate on that, the extent to which in a positive way, the Paris Accord has had, and the fact that it had no enforceable mechanism? How did it play out up to? How do you assess that yourself?
The European Union, the countries of the European Union basically do what that accord says, but as you said, there is no enforcement mechanism. And for instance, one of the greatest critic of all the system is Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Each time, every year, every November that we have had this global climate summit, he denounces the politicians. He has told them repeatedly that they are not telling the truth to the people of the country that they represent. In other words, they say, we are going to do this, but they don't do it. And we have the IMF, for instance, which is a part of the Department of the Treasury of this country. The IMF reported that we are still funding or subsidizing the petrochemical industry by $7 trillion per year. $7 trillion, not small amount of money. So we keep subsidizing the very energy that is actually harming the planet and harming us personally. And and there's also the other effect of extraordinary importance is that on agriculture, on growing food.
Right.
There are times that some crops cannot take this temperature that they are affected, and they don't produce as much as we think they should produce. So agroecology, the science of growing food, is probably the best to do that. But then the conventional agriculture, the industrialized form of agriculture that uses all sorts of chemicals, petrochemicals, pesticides, and so on, they cannot, I mean, they produce food, but the food is not really that great for us. So in other words, but coming back to your question is that we really don't know exactly what's happening because of the deception that politicians employ in reporting what they are supposed to do according to the Paris Accord.
But in this regard, those who are watching, those who are very concerned people about climate change, like yourself, are there any groups, any universities who are doing this assessment that is necessary? That means if there is no assessment on a regular basis about the various countries, specifically, for example, the large countries that produce the greatest amount of gas emission, like the United States, like China, like India, the big, huge countries. So such an assessment, if it is not produced on a regular basis, obviously the public in general is not aware of what's happening. Uh, are you aware if such an assessment is taking place and by whom?
Am I aware of what?
If there's an assessment about the adverse impact of climate change, if
Yeah.
such an assessment is being made anywhere so that the public will be better informed in terms of the horrific ramification of climate change.
Yeah, the study I mentioned already done by the federal government under the Biden administration in 2023, it seems to me is the most detailed account of the adverse effects of all this. And they are also very pessimistic there. I mean, they admitted that we're not doing enough, and we need to start phasing out this unsustainable energy. I mean, sources that is the
But
petrochemical.
if this assessment was made, okay, it's a great, and they come up with the clear cut and answer to the question in terms of the impact of climate change. What is being done with it? I mean, in terms of how obviously it has not become a separate public knowledge. This particular assessment. So what is missing here?
What is missing, unfortunately, we had this new administration with Mr. Trump, and he denounced the whole thing. He said climate change does not exist. It's not important at all. And he made all sorts of allegations. I mean, they're all based on falsehoods because the man does not know what is he saying. And
Obviously.
regrettably, he has scientists who tone his rhetoric and they give it a kind of scientific version that in fact we have no climate change. We're doing very well and we have plenty of resources and we need to sell them petroleum and export it to the Europeans and so on. And so there are some environmental organizations like the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Friends of the Earth, that they publish their own newsletters in which they analyze what's going on and they inform the people who read them that the situation is getting bad and we need to do something about it. But the politicians, regrettably, of both parties, don't seem to focus on this question, especially the Republicans, that is.
Yeah. In this connection, the United States, it seems to me, is based on what we know, is responsible roughly between 13 to 14% of gas emission. You know, but then the rest of the world is, it's like 87, 86% of that's by the rest of the world. And of course, including China and India, like we mentioned before. In this particular assessment, have they mentioned any other countries besides the United States has been systematically, basically violating this since going back to 2015 in particular, with the pause during the Biden administration, and now came back again, Trump, who is basically, like you just said, completely dismissing this whole thing. So how is the performance, to your best of your knowledge, of other countries in terms of adherence to the Paris Accord?
The only country that is absolutely devoted to alternative energy, that is solar and wind, is China. China, it seems to me, and I have been to China 3 times to give lectures at universities. The Chinese have gone 100% on behind this, and they are #1 on the planet right now in terms of producing electric cars, solar panels, you name it. As far as alternatives, China is far ahead of the United States and any other country. And now there are all sorts of theories that they're doing it for geopolitical, strategic reasons. I don't know. But it seems to me they are the model. I mean, we should imitate them. We should try to catch up with them.
I mean, obviously, regardless of the rationale why they're doing it, the fact it remains is the best thing that they're doing for the environment. And it's a massive country. So whether it's political, whether it's strategic, or whatever it is, the motivation behind it, I think they should be, praised for what they're doing. How about the European community, all of Europe, with 600, 700 million people, including Russia, with more like 850 million people? How is it? How they are adhering to the Paris Accord?
The European community, the European Union, I think is following China. They are not as good as the Chinese, but at least they are moving in that direction, and they are not keeping them. They are not saying that there's no climate change, just like the U.S. government is saying as we speak right now. So we have the Chinese, the European Union, as leading the effort to get away from the energies that are likely to cause us trouble. That is the burning of fossil fuels. And I regret, because of the existence of wars, the war in the Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the war in Africa, the wars in Africa, all of this add tremendous amount of stuff that are not good for the environment. I mean, you have all these gigantic trucks and fleets of aircraft and fleets of boats. All of them are working on petroleum.
Right.
And they're burning petroleum every day of every moment of the day, so to speak. So war has a tremendous adverse effects on climate change and therefore on long-term survival. So we need to stop the wars, and we need to focus on this tremendous challenge that we have as a global community to come down and live with our means and the abilities of the earth to protect us and to give us life as it has done for millennia of years.
Yeah, I'm with a given, of course, that Trump obviously denies that there's such a thing as a climate change. But my understanding, there are many states in the United States here that actually proceeding with, regardless of what Trump is saying or doing, in pursuing a better, policies and taking action in order to prevent the worsening of climate change. What is your knowledge about some of these states and what they in fact are doing, contrary to what Trump is advocating?
I'm sorry, I missed the point. Is you're asking about?
Then there are a number of states in the United States.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that are actually, even though Trump is denying there's such a thing as climate change, they are basically ignoring what he's saying. They are proceeding, however, trying to follow much of what the Paris Accord has been advocating. Are you aware of what they are doing? Have they been achieved something that is more tangible, which is contrary to what Trump would like to see happening?
Well, I live in California, and it seems to me California is the largest state with the largest number of people population. And according to the governor, from what I have heard, they are doing as much as they can. But still, when it came to for instance, a year or so ago, he came a point that he said he cannot longer give you the amount of money that you would be getting back if you had if you had added solar panels on the roof of your house a couple of years ago. So it was a negative point. I mean, people are concerned about money. They are concerned about spending money and so on. So that has slowed down the transition to alternatives. But if there are people like, for instance, Al Gore, the former vice president, and he's very vociferous and very eloquent in defending the phasing out of petroleum and all the other things. And they are saying good things. They're saying, for instance, that no matter the negative or the burning of fossil fuels, the alternative energies are so far ahead that it's cheaper. They are cheaper. It's cheaper, in other words, to have solar panels and produce your own electricity rather than get the electricity from petroleum burning companies. And so it's a kind of an optimistic vision that I hope it has foundations and it can actually last for long. But the effort right now of this whole government right now in the United States, it has begun to reverse the trend, and there are more and more people getting back into burning. And you have General Motors, for instance, that abandoned a factory that they were planning to build to create electric cars, and now they are going back into the old burning, creating automobiles with petroleum as a energy source. So it's a mixed question, and I'm very upset by all this because I mean, I love life, and I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. So each time you face them, you said, now, what kind of life are they going to face when they get to be 30 years old or 40 years old? In other words, in 10 years, 30, 20 years, how will the temperature and the climate treat them? And will they be able to stand it, so to speak?
Yeah.
And that's why I mean, I'm very concerned that all these well-educated people, what do they think they go? They're going to go to another planet? Is this what they have in mind? They want to destroy this planet and go to the moon? I mean, where are they going to go?
Right.
I have heard the stories of billionaires buying former missile silos and converted them into palaces, so to speak, pretending that if there's a nuclear war, they're going to withstand it to survive the nuclear war and keep living. I mean, that's so stupid. I mean,
Right.
it seems to me we need to wake up and get to be, what they say, be an adult in the room rather than
In connection with that, I just want to mention to you some of the ramification, and then there's a follow-up question. For example, the prolonged drought in the Horn of Africa is devastating crops and and livestock. Increasing temperature expand the range of disease-dying mosquitoes, spreading illness in like malaria. The desertification of the shell contribute to competition over land and water, which is leading to conflict. Intensified hurricanes in the Caribbean. Then you have the melting galaxies in the Himalayas threaten fresh water, for example, to millions in India. Extreme heat waves in India and Pakistan reduce labor productivity, and so on. The list is long, and it is clear. There is a clear evidence that these things are taking place, and yet the public is not aware. I mean, there is no public discussions taking place pointing clearly to these development, to what's actually happening. So from your perspective, having been involved for so long, what is going to take? I mean, the evidence is clear, statistics are clear, examples are there, but then the public, by and large, I'm talking about the public generally speaking. Take the public in the United States or even in Europe. On a day-to-day basis, they are not cognizant. They are not aware something wrong is taking place, but there isn't much public narrative discussion about it. What is going to take to awaken the public to the imminent danger of climate change?
Well, I think the explanation to that is that number one, there are so many wars going on, and they are involved, they are concerned about the war, and they are hearing reports about the war and so on. And number two, the environmental community is divided. In other words, there are, let's say, X number of environmental organizations. In my articles, I suggest, why don't they get together and have the same idea and begin to inform people at the same time, rather than sporadically go through their newsletters? You don't want to have a catastrophe, complete catastrophe, let's say the disappearance of Colorado or Illinois or whatever, and then say, oh my God, let's try to do something. In California, for instance, we had massive fires. And a couple of years ago, a whole city next to Pasadena called Altadena was burned to the ground almost. And yet now I spoke to a couple of them that made it through and they didn't have their house burned down. And I said to them, what about your neighbors? He said, well, they're trying to rebuild. They're trying to rebuild on a burned ground that is very toxic because of all the materials that the houses were made and so on. And so there's no united force of any kind, whether it comes from the scientific community or the environmental community or the government. The government is out right now. So we need the environmental community to unite and to inform and to take the ground and begin to protest.
Yeah, but that you need an activist. I mean, they are not going to do so for political reason, for economic reason,
Correct.
for whatever reason. But then, if there is no people like yourself, you're pushing. What is going to need, in my view, hundreds, thousands of people like you, like me, who actually need day in and day out to advocate. Why aren't they doing so? those who are not, have no stakes in politics, have no personal stake in economic, whatever the case may be. Why aren't they there? What is going to take to create that kind of awareness of what is of the I mean, this horrific development that we are witnessing happening day in and day out. Like you mentioned, the great fires, the hurricanes, the torrential rains causing so much floods. And why are there enough people who are actually going out and say, and begin to expose all of these things? And there are plenty of examples to point out to.
I will try to answer this with a tiny bit of a personal story. My last book is about climate change. It's called Earth on Fire.
Right.
And I have trouble. I live in a community that there are 5 colleges and a university. There is no interest on the part of those professors to invite me to even give a lecture about presenting my book. So the very idea of having a president who claims something against climate change and the money that the universities have from the federal government, that has terrified the professors, the intellectual community. So they are not doing very much at all because of the existence on the very top of the government of a person who says there's no climate change. And so it's like the universities in this country have frozen because of this kind of political impact, invisible, but nevertheless strong impact. And look at Columbia University in New York and Harvard University and so on. So they are not doing what they should be doing. They are wonderful scientists who have been publishing, and they are informing the people who read what they publish. Just like I write, I have written dozens and dozens of articles about this issue in a number of books. But I don't know who reads me. What do they do after they read something? I don't know. So this shows a kind of a fracture of democracy we have. Democracy is not really what it should be. We don't inform each other. We live in communities where people barely know each other next to who lives next door. People are involved with the iPhones, and there are all sorts of other issues in their lives. And they hear climate change and say, what is this? Climate change? They have the heat and the rains and so on, but they don't have a complete theoretical explanation of what is actually happening, to give them a historical background that, hey, this is what you see today is not typical, it's not normal, it's against science. I mean, we have the climatologists who have been informing us. We have the history of the last 100 years of more and more CO2, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, more and more methane and so on. They don't connect all these dots and have a picture in their mind that there is some real danger. I mean, it's not a war coming, but it's going to be a war when it comes to that point, and farmers cannot grow enough food, and there is not enough drinking water. I mean, the farmers in the Central Valley of California, they're making holes to the ground, and they extract water to water their plant, their crops. And that water slowly is not being replenished, because this is a water that is for centuries collecting down there, and they are exhausting that water. For instance, the city of Las Vegas has extra water because they desalinated water, and they're trying to sell it to Nevada, to Utah, to other states nearby. So we are facing all this water crisis and food crisis, and much less in Africa. You have hunger and so on, and people just don't. Their day-to-day existence is so strenuous that they cannot think about the stuff that you and I are talking right now. I mean, they say climate change, that's fine. They don't know the history. They don't know what's happening, and they see each event as separate. They don't make the connections. And
Let me ask you, suppose you were the director in charge of the agency that deal with the environment, and the president or somebody top official in the government came and asked you this, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all. In fact, you have plenty knowledge to answer this. And let's say that you are not intimidated by the political environment, and you are able to say what you want to say, What are some of the practical suggestions that you could have that can advance so that people will listen, that we can promote? What are some of the steps? There are 5, 6 different things that you think, given the political environment today that exists in this country, still you live here. What would you say that is still doable, regardless of being intimidated, regardless of lack of funding for climate change? What would you do?
If I had that power and influence, I would say start with transportation, get rid of most of the big cars that burn petroleum, get more electric cars on the road, get more trains, electric trains. For the first time in my life in China, I took a bullet train. It's just, why would China have bullets trains and there are no bullet trains in the United States? I mean, it's just completely extraordinary.
The answer to that really, the Chinese invested, the government invested in these development, bullet trains and electric car. The government invested. Here, it is all for profit. Only private corporation would have the kind of a trains. So the government here is not investing in mass transportation, is not investing in electrical car. I mean, how do you change that dynamics? I mean, not just Trump. Even under many democratic administration, they have not allocated certain. Given the budget of reaching now nearly $30 trillion a year or something along these lines, why are they devoting half a trillion for public transportation? I mean, given again, not just Trump, but other administrations, specifically Democratic, who are not aware of it, and they have been acting in order to take some corrective actions.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the failure of democracy that we have in this country. We pretend we have democracy, but I don't think that we really have democracy. But at any rate, the number two thing I would do is to, if I were the state of California, the governor, I would fund the putting of solar panels on the roof of every house in the state, and subsidize that effort considerably. I mean, we need to make that move. We need to produce our own electricity from the sun. The sun is going to be there forever. So what is the problem? Why? I mean, the sun is forever. We're talking about billions of years. It is, to me, in my humble opinion, the sun has been there forever. And it provides sort of free energy, and we don't take advantage of that. I think that's absolutely stupid. And then we have the wind, the same thing. It's just, to me, it's common sense to take advantage of the nature without abusing nature. So we have that form of energy that is solar panels. We have public transport. And the other thing is agriculture. Agriculture, for instance, as a kind of a form of economic activity, is using tremendous amount of petrochemicals, petroleum. Pesticides are created from petroleum. And then you have synthetic fertilizers, also petroleum products too. So we need to move away from that version of agriculture and move into ecological agriculture. Ecological agriculture, not exactly going back to my father's time, the peasant form of agriculture, but something that uses a little bit of machinery, but also scientific knowledge. Agriculture, agroecology is the synthesis of traditional knowledge with scientific findings of ecological science. And we know that there are insects, for instance, that will eat other insects. So why do we go and spray the whole thing and kill everything? And what about the birds? What are they supposed to eat? If you kill all the insects, the birds will die. There's no food for them. If you are a honeybee, what are you going to do? You cannot go there for nectar. You're going to be dead within a second because they use neurotoxic pesticides, if you can believe it. Right now, there are neurotoxins and carcinogens are the most popular pesticides in this country, and they have been there for decades. Don't tell me that they don't know what they do. They do, but yet because of the influence of these companies that make this stuff, the government, that is the EPA administrator, the senator will call the governor of the EPA administrator, say, hey, hello, Mr. whatever. How's the petition going on about the
Right.
approval of this chemical and so on? And I saw that. I mean, I was there in hundreds of meetings where all these people were talking to the EPA, senior EPA officials, telling them this is what they need. And the EPA
Right.
officials didn't have the knowledge or the guts, the courage to say, no, we are not going to do that again because we are causing damage. You're hurting the honeybees, you're killing the pollinators. I mean, pollinators are extremely valuable in nature. So why do we do that? That's
Right.
kind of anti-science movement, more or less. So
Right.
we need to take our lessons from science.
So,
Poor Aristotle, 2,400 years ago, he wrote about honeybees. He wrote a book, zoology. He invented zoology as we know it.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, and now we are 2,500 years later and we go back to the Dark Ages.
Right. So, you mentioned agriculture, but I was just coming across material about animal farming. And
Yeah.
I read something which was really, to me, I mean, how many people actually know that? They said in this study that each cow produce pollution equivalent to a car, if not more so. I'm sure you are aware of that. And of course, the farming industry in the United States, specifically, with the beef and all of that, is massive. It's massive. So we talk about, gas emission, or we're not talking, for example, about farming, that it is also animal farming, that it is one of the main polluters of climate. What's your take on that?
This is exactly, you're correct. I mean, the animal farms are number one. They are unregulated by state or federal government. If you were to call up EPA and say, tell us how many animal farms do we have, they would not know. Where are they located? They wouldn't probably not know. They're completely unregulated. And, I use, for instance, in the book I have written about climate, the earth on fire, I focus on animal farms to the degree that I got data from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention that demonstrate that each animal farm becomes a factory of disease.
Exactly.
They put the animals so close to each other so that they get ill. So to avoid the death of these animals, they give them antibiotics in the food that they actually give them. Let's say corn or soybeans or whatever. And so that the people who take care of the animals, they actually get the disease from the animals. And they go home and they give the disease to their wives and children and so on and so on. So the thesis of the book I have already written is that, theoretically speaking, most likely the COVID-19 came out of animal farms because there are so many, there are thousands of them in the country. They have the disease problem. Then the people who slaughter those animals also get infected by the animal, by the meat and the atmosphere that they live. So it's just completely unregulated and nobody gives it. They really don't care. I mean, I'm talking about government officials. They know about these facts and they are doing nothing. Regrettably so, because it's a kind of a bomb ready to explode, and it's likely to bring us another COVID in the near future because we ended up out of this COVID. We had millions of people dying. We have tremendous effects all over the planet. The planet stopped working, for instance. No airplanes working, nothing. Everything was silent for a while. And it was beneficial to the environment, but it wasn't exactly beneficial to the people that lost everything. And therefore, we need to be proactive and we need to use science in guiding us to do certain things. Our policies should be designed, should be the implementation of the knowledge we have by doing the research that we do. And we know what's happening in the animal farms. Therefore, it seems to me we should phase them out, just like we should phase out the petroleum and natural gas.
But how do you phase out, for example, animal farm, when, for example, Americans are so addicted to steaks, to eating meat? How is it, do you think it's conceivable? Is it possible to eliminate animal farming? How that can be done?
When I was growing up, my father had a small flock of sheep and goat. And maybe once a month he would kill a goat or something, and we would eat meat. But we would eat meat only once a month at the most. And so why do we need cheeseburgers or hamburgers every day now? Why? I mean, it's anyway. If you look at how the animals are treated and what they eat and the environment that they live, I would never. I mean, I have not eaten meat since the 90s. I stopped
Right.
eating
Right.
meat completely because I know what's happening. And I said, my God, I'm not going to eat this stuff. It's impossible. I love lamb chops, but I'm not going to eat any.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So what exactly? I mean, honestly, I felt I'm doing now exactly what you just said. I have stopped eating meat, not just not because also the climate, impact of farming on the climate, but in terms of health. I mean, I'm told that eating meat is simply not healthy, not healthy. So should people who are involved in the healthcare system speak about something like this, which indirectly again would have impact on farming, animal farming?
Yeah, this is another failure of the scientific community. I mean, you have all these medical doctors, thousands and thousands of them, charge a tremendous amount of money to even talk to them for 5 minutes. Why don't, since they know what we're discussing, why don't they inform their patients or the people in general that you should eat very little amount of meat? Maybe we should stop eating meat because of the conditions surrounding the birth and the development of the animal that we actually eat. And they don't, just like the other scientists don't get together to protest about doing nothing about climate change. It's, I don't know what it is, frankly. I mean, I'm very disappointed. I keep writing, all my anger gets into my writing. And I tried politely to inform people and tell them, hey, this is what's going on. Let's just focus on science, for God's sake. We are not in the dark ages. We don't want to return to the dark ages. So I am angry. I mean, I just thought this. I hear all these theocratic speeches about this, and I'm related to Jesus and so on, and
Right.
it's just beyond me. I don't understand why they do what they do. Just
Yeah, at any subject I tackle, I always look for what are the solutions, of course, given the circumstances and the limitations. So what is the solution? And then, of course, we talked about, public advocacy, which is pretty much missing in the United States. Um, so we need to look in terms, and again, sort of just with you to explore these possibilities. What in fact can be done given the limitations? Like I said earlier, political, economic. That is, obviously we need to awaken the public. I mean, if there's no public outcry and say we are not going to take it anymore, because our children are going to suffer, our great grandchildren are going to suffer, and we're going to have to begin a serious process. It's not going to obviously happen overnight, but we're going to have to have a sort of a plan of action strategy in order to deal with this right here in the United States. Of course, many other countries will have to follow suit. So what can we in fact do in terms of mobilizing some public opinion around this such a crucial issue?
well, what we're doing right now is part of that process. It seems to me, newspapers, and of course, I'm very pleased. The New York Times does publish a lot of articles on climate, and
Yeah.
I read them religiously.
But then, how many people really read the New York Times?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a million, 2 million. How many people are actually reading it? I mean, I'm not dismissing that. I think the New York Times is an admirable job in this
Yes.
regard. There's no question. Many other major papers should follow suit with the New York Times, but they're not necessarily doing so. But this is very important. What else you think can be practically done?
Well, practically speaking, I mean, I go for shopping and I never buy anything that is not organic, certified organic. I start with that. I
Uh,
eat organic food. I don't eat meat
right.
because of what I know. I keep talking to people, even in the grocery store, when I see them picking up something that is not conventional, I say, why are you doing that? Sometimes they look at me and they say, what is this? I said, if you understand the difference between organic and conventional, some of them know. What do you mean?
So in
So I
this
have to
regard,
explain.
the person who's going to the grocery store because there's enough, and they see on chicken, for example, it says organic. Can you tell our audience, okay, if you're getting just any kind of chicken is one thing, if you're getting chicken, organic chicken
Mhm.
is going to be different. How would that have, what is the difference
The
in terms
difference is
of
that the
impact, in
chicken,
terms of impact?
yeah, the difference is that the meat of the chicken that has been certified organic is that the bird, while alive, was actually out of a confined space. It was in a grass area, and that the seeds and the food that they actually gave this bird was not contaminated by pesticides, and therefore the meat of the bird would be good for you. I mean, it would be not contaminated by toxins.
Right.
And but in general, the definition of the organic means that the farmer does not use pesticides, does not use synthetic fertilizers, does not use radiation, and therefore the whatever is defined as organic, it's good for you. And if there is any poison, it will be much less poison than in the conventional food.
And what's
That
the relationship between organic and climate change? That is, animals are animals. Let's say meat cow farming, like say cows. Let's say they will be loose and be able to eat grass and no antibiotics, nothing like that. So how would that a difference in terms of climate change, organic food versus regular food, not organic?
the animal that has been fed, just like we are, the animal that has been fed non-clear or wholesome food in the face of the cow eating grass that has not been sprayed
Right.
and is by any means not poisoned by any other means, then that animal is healthier. It does not need to be given antibiotics. And if you're going to sacrifice an animal and eat its meat, the meat is much healthier for you, the person who eats it, than anything else.
But
So
would that have less or more impact on climate change? That's what I'm trying to relate the two.
yeah. It would be because the chemicals you use, whether they're made out of petroleum or anything else, they are related to global warming because the burning of petroleum does cause this effect. And therefore, the less connections we have with these fossil fuels, the better it is for us, the better it is for the planet, and therefore the better it is for the food that comes out of that system. Uh, so it just uh, I mean, I will always go back to what I remember when I was a teenager growing up and I was going to high school and see my father doing what he did. We never used chemicals. He never had a tractor. He was just, he had a mule pushing a little plow in the land. We produce our own olive oil, our own wine from the grapes. I remember the greatest pleasure in my life was to stamp on the grapes and produce the juice that became eventually wine. It was an ancient tradition related to god Dionysus, all the way to antiquity, thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, because I'm a historian and I have been reading about what the ancient Greeks did or didn't do, it just to me it's just a life, a culture that has been wiped out more or less.
Yeah. Another briefing, we talk about the food, meat, and all of that. Also, just a couple of words from you in terms of other healthcare implications. Like, for example, you live in Los Angeles. I live in New York City. What people should be aware, and just for my listeners to try to get this to sink in, so I understand the horrific implication of climate change. So, in terms of health, what's the impact directly on people who are just living in cities like this? And there's, can you sort of identify some of these things just the same like you do with
Yeah,
food?
they should always take the subway. In a big city, either the bus or the subway, they should never drive in a big city. I mean, it's just, when I, wherever I went to teach in a university, I never had a car with me. I
Right.
always took the bus, the public transport, or whatever they existed, or I asked my colleagues to take me here and there and so on. So drive as little as possible. And if you can, it's safe for you, take a bike. I still bike. I bike and I walk. I walk and I
Right.
bike every day. So it's a healthy tradition, and you feel also good because you're not contributing to the problem that you already know.
So this is a very important point, and that is, that is the public itself. That is each individual. That is, an individual can make, however small, tiny contribution. So what I'm thinking, and what I was, constantly looking always when something reducible, something doable. So what you're saying is extremely important. An individual, each individual, by changing their style, life habits, they can actually contribute to climate change, to the improvement in climate. Would you obviously agree with that, don't you?
Yeah, of course, of course. And then you have friends, so you speak to your friends, you invite them to your house and so on. So anything you do, you usually talk it with your friends, and their friends might be tempted themselves to imitate you since you're doing these healthy activities.
Right.
Riding a bike, if it's a safe place to do it, it's perfect for your health. And then eating organic food is perfect for you as well.
Right.
And you don't feel guilty that you're doing something that you already know it's causing harm. And therefore, we should be spreading this message to all of us. If we have a doctor, tell the doctor, hey, what are you doing about that? And I have already done it.
Right.
When I have an ophthalmologist, and I see him once a year, and I ask him, I say, what are you doing?
Right. We have only a couple of minutes left. I just want you to give it to you to conclude what, some recommendation, whatever it is that you would like to impart with our audience listening to you now. Oh, again, please go ahead. What would you like to say? Your last word on the subject in this session.
Yeah, I would like the people who are listening to us maybe to take a look at the book I have already written. It's called Earth on Fire, because in that book I combine all the knowledge I had about climate change plus agriculture, and I give a picture that I think is encouraging in the long term if we follow through. And then I would urge people in private lives to be conscious of what the major problem it is. It's an ecological problem, it's a moral problem, it's a political problem, and we need to resolve it personally and with our friends and our families and our communities. If you live in a city like I do, occasionally I go to the city council and I give a brief 4 minutes talk about ecological issues, so to speak, and I urge them to do something about ecological literacy to raise the understanding of what is going on. Even the people who drive cars, do they know what comes out of the pipe of the car? I don't know, but they should know, so they feel compelled to move away from that poison to an electric car. At least if they have to drive an electric car. We have a used electric car, and my wife drives it. I don't drive anymore.
I see.
So we should be, in other words, we should be politically active and keep reading and keep acting and talking to our politicians, to our if you are a Christian, to your priest, if you are whatever religion, you have to speak to the person that represents the religion and say, hey, give a talk in the church, for God's sake. What's going on? I mean, this is important. This is the house of God. The earth is the house of God. I mean, this is what the ancient Greeks believed, that there were divinities all over the planet, all over. So therefore, we should respect that, and we should adore it and love it, because the earth is, in fact, the greatest of all gods. If there are any gods, the earth is it.
Right. I think what you mentioned about the religion is the earth is the art of God. It's very telling. It's very telling. I would continue this conversation with you for hours to come, and I hope you come back to this program and we talk more and more about it, because it is so critical subject. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, waking you up so early in Los Angeles.
No, I love it, and I thank you very much. I really am very grateful.
Thank you again for your time,
Thank you very much.
and for your this is a campaign that you have undertaken through your writing, through your lectures. Everybody should be grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye now. Thank you for listening to this episode on the issues. You can find this podcast on my SoundCloud page, and stay tuned to my social media accounts for the latest analysis and announcements.